In the opening scene, we are introduced to Isabel, a young fun-loving girl about to fly to a different city for work. A co-passenger sees her struggle to place her bags in the overhead compartments and offers to help. This starts a conversation between the two, and soon the chit-chat leads them to talk about their professions. We find out that the man is a classical music critic. Isabel tries to keep the conversation going and reveals that her first boyfriend was also a classical musician named Pasternak. The name rings a bell in the man's head, and he remembers the worst musical theory he was given to review many years back. The person who submitted the theory was also named Pasternak. The man recalls how he dragged the theory to the ground with his review and ended Pasternak's musical career. Suddenly, Isabel looks at him in surprise, revealing that they're talking about the same person. She was still Pasternak's girlfriend when the review for his music theory came out, and she remembers how he didn't come out of his room for 3 days after the review was published. Just then, an old woman in another row gets intrigued by their conversation. She turns around and discloses that Pasternak was her student years ago in high school. He is still the most unique student she has had because he wasn't good at anything. The three look at each other in surprise at the coincidence. But the strange occurrences don't end there. A young man from a few rows in front recognizes the old woman as his high school teacher. As it turns out, he used to bully Pasternak in school. The musical critic recognizes the pattern and asks the other passengers if any of them know someone named Pasternak. When almost all of them raise their hands, it is clear that something is wrong. This is further proven when they find out no one on the plane even paid for their tickets. Some of them won it in a lottery and others were sent by their companies like Isabel was. The music critic asks Isabel how her relationship with Pasternak ended, and she discloses that she cheated on him with his only friend who is also seated a few seats back on the plane. They conclude that every passenger on the plane has done something bad to Pasternak and he has set them up to fly together all at once. The third story takes place on a deserted highway. A wealthy, stuck-up businessman named Diego is driving on his own. When he encounters another car, swerving past him, enraged by the driver's lack of driving skills, Diego yells racial slurs at him and gives him the finger. Only a few miles away, he gets a flat tire and has to stop his car right in front of a bridge. He tries his best to fix the tire, but for some reason the car doesn't start. Giving up, Diego calls a mechanic who will be there in half an hour. Right after the call, he notices the car from earlier driving towards him. Knowing that the driver would want revenge, Diego quickly gets inside and locks the doors. As he had predicted, the driver named Milan parks his car in front and backs into Diego's car. He goes on to bring out a hammer and smash it several times into the windshield. Diego watches him in frustration, trying to control his anger because he knows he can't do anything. In turn, Milan takes his abuse further by defecating on the car's windshield and peeing on it. After that, he gets into his car and suddenly Diego's car starts working. He drives his car into Milan's and pushes it off a cliff before driving away. In the following scene, we see Milan climbing up the cliff, having survived the crash. He runs after Diego but cannot keep up with the car. Just when we think their interaction has ended, something takes over Diego and he makes a U-turn, aiming to drive into Milan and kill him. However, before he can, he loses control of his car and falls down the cliff like Milan did. The latter now has an upper hand. He breaks into Diego's vehicle with a crowbar and gets into a fight with him. They struggle for a long time before Milan manages to push Diego off the cliff with the seatbelt wrapped around his neck. He then sets fire to the gas tank, hoping the car will explode and take Diego with it. But before he can get off, the businessman gains control of his position and holds him back. The fourth short film is about an engineer named Simon. One day after work, he goes to a bakery excited to buy a cake for his daughter's birthday. On his way out, Simon notices his car is missing and finds a parking ticket on the ground. It turns out that he parked in a restricted zone, which he could have never known because the curb isn't painted yellow. Even though he is getting late for the birthday party, he decides to go to the DMV office first to file a complaint. To his utter disbelief, he is asked to pay the parking and the towing fee before he can make a complaint about the unpainted curb. He tries to argue his way with the officer, but is dismissed. On his way home, Simon is stopped by a traffic jam, so his daughter has to cut a cookie on her birthday instead of the cake. Simon's wife, Melissa, is enraged by his negligence to his family. Even when she is explaining her disappointment, Simon keeps complaining about the lack of regulations in their city. In the end, Melissa asks for a divorce, deciding she can no longer be with him. The following day, Simon visits the DMV office yet again and is faced with the same problem. No one wants to take his complaint before he pays for the mistake he didn't make. All his pent-up frustration comes out as he hits the glass barrier with a fire extinguisher. He is arrested immediately and the news makes it to television. The following day, Simon's lawyer bails him out and reveals that he has been kicked out by his company for ruining their image. The same day, he has to be at the court to discuss who gets custody of his daughter after the divorce. The case leans towards his wife because he has no job at the moment. To solve this, Simon immediately starts looking for work, but because of his reputation, no company wants to give him a chance. Frustrated by the rejection, he curses out the receptionist at one of the offices, but karma catches up with him quickly when he finds out his car has been towed again. This time he simply takes a cab to the DMV office, pays off the ticket, and brings his car back. In the next scene, we see Simon enjoying breakfast at a cafe. His car is parked outside again in a no parking zone, but this time even the curb is marked. He watches in silence as his car is towed away for the third time in 2 weeks. Hours later, a loud explosion startles everyone in the DMV office and breaks down half of the building.